to the System Thinking Certification Program Kumu Relationship Mapping segment. Before I post this video, I'll go back and cut out the dead space at the beginning. I changed the program a little bit because last week Jeff Moore did a marvelous overview of the various and sundry capabilities of Kumu, and if you didn't attend the session, I would highly recommend that you watch one of the videos. You can find them on the Kumu mapping entry point. In addition to the two videos, we posted links for all of the various Kumu maps that were presented as part of that overview, and some of them portray a wide variety of capabilities in terms of using Kumu for doing relationship mapping. What I wanted to, and while that was a good overview, today I wanted to actually spend a little time and get into some non-obvious aspects of doing relationship maps in Kumu and give you a sense of why, at the moment, if I'm going to develop a qualitative relationship model that I want to provide to other people to make comments on, Kumu is hands down my #1 choice. If I want to develop a qualitative model and I want to actually do storytelling, the only option the only option I have at the moment is Insight Maker, because the Kumu people haven't finished the storytelling aspect, though I expect that they will get it done before too long. And in terms of the environment and being able to craft a model, the environment is very fluid, as you'll see, and the built-in capabilities to actually solicit interaction and comments from other people is now quite fluid. So when you decide that you want to actually create a model on your projects page, you simply create a project, and on your dashboard it lists all of the projects that you have access to, and it tells you which ones actually belong to you and which ones belong to other people. In terms of this one, I just created it to use as a demo for the session. It was created by STW. The Systems Thinking Certification Program project was created by a user called STIA, which is one of my alter egos. And a new thing that they just added last weekend, I guess, is this list of the last 20 comments that you posted on various and sundry different projects. So once you create a project, they're all listed here. And in terms of interpreting the Kumu URL, it's the kumu.io / and then whatever your username is, and then the name of the project itself, and then all of the rest of it is locators within that project. So if you look at the Systems Thinking Certification Program, it's kumu.io, the username, the name of the project, and then all of the rest of the specific locator of content within that project. So the project itself has a profile page that relates to the project, and then you can have one or more maps associated with the project. And each element that you create on the map has its own profile page, and then you can get back to the main profile page by clicking in the background. So in terms of this, when you create a new project, this is what you end up with. This is KRM for Kumu Relationship Mapping, and I can label the name of the map anything that I want to. And this is relationship development, and then that becomes part of the locator, if I go to KRM, it will take me to this page, but if I was on another page, I could get back to this point by identifying this particular locator. So now I'm on this map. The only way to create the first element is to click on Add Element, and I'll just call it Goal and hit Enter, and I now have an element on here. And the default for all of the elements that you create is that they are floating, so that if you hit the B key, you'll notice that it bounces around, it relocates. You'll see that better as I enter additional items. Now I can create another one called current state, and the other way to create an element is to hold down the Alt key, mouse over one, and simply drag, and I'll call this gap. You probably already figured out that I'm building a balancing loop. And now that these exist, I can select this and I can say add a connection and tell it I want to connect to gap, and it tells me the elements that already exist, so I can do this way. Or I could have simply held down the Alt key and dragged from there to there, and you'll find that much easier. But you can see the way that this is floating around as I move things. And the gap typically is the impetus for action which is intended to move the current state in the direction of the goal. So I now have a balancing loop, but the thing is, Kumu is deciding on its own where it wants to locate things, which is really nice for some maps that you create. But if you're creating causal loops or relationship maps, rich pictures that you specifically want to look a current way, then you can pin things down by coming down here and say pin, and then they will stay where you put them. So now, wherever I put these, they will stay there. And you can, over here, you can set the default so that elements that you create are fixed as opposed to floating. And you can also indicate whether the connections are undirected, directed, or mutual. So all of these connections, I probably want arrows on them, since it is a causal loop diagram. Though I can set this up so that new elements are fixed and they are directed as opposed to floating. And that way, when I create new elements, they will automatically have arrows on them. All right, so I now have the essence of a balancing loop, which I can move around, and I can also reorient the arrows so that it does look more like a typical balancing loop. Though what I also want to do is I want to label this as a balancing loop. So relationship maps are created from elements, connections, and loops. And loops are defined. It allows you to define a loop once you select two or more connections. So I selected this connection. I hold down the Control key and add one. Oh, sorry. It's not the Control key. It's the Shift key. Select one, hold down the Shift key, add one. Notice that the add loop showed up here. Add this one and add this one. And then I'm going to label this B1, B1, goal seeking. So it now adds this label here in the center of this, and I oh, I don't know why it's moving that. All right. So I now have a labeled balancing loop, and while I can write a description associated with each one of these elements once I develop them. I can also write or add descriptions for the individual relationships if it's appropriate for what it is that I'm trying to develop. I can also write a description for the loop itself, which describes the entire action of the balancing loop, which makes it easier to describe the action of the whole loop as opposed to someone having to step through all of the various and sundry pieces. And while the connections are labeled as the connection from the source to the destination, you can also alter those and call them whatever you choose to name them, so that if you name them something, then the label shows up on the connection itself, so that you could label them the same way that you label links in Insight Maker. So I now have a goal-seeking balancing loop with all of the appropriate pieces, and it wasn't difficult to develop it to start with. The nice thing that I now think about Kumu is you've developed this project. You can go to the discussions tab and you can start a new discussion, and you say do you have which is, this is just an example, so that I've now created a discussion on this project. Because it's a public project, I can send this portion of the URL to anyone, and they can view this project, and they can view the discussion that's been started, and if they have a Kumu account, they can comment on your model. You don't have to make them for a model that's created for a project. The model can have observers, contributors, and managers. Those of you who are participating in the Systems Thinking Certification Program, you're all observers of that program, so that you actually get to add comments and edit them, and you're also notified when any new discussion is created about that particular project. Though a person in the public space who has a Kumu username, you don't have to make them an observer of the project for them to be able to comment on the model. And the Kumu user accounts are free, so that you can invite a person and send them the kumu.io/signup URL and say, if you don't have, I'd really like you to comment on this model. If you don't already have a Kumu account, you can create one here, and then you can go to this discussion and add comments. When a person adds a comment, they automatically end up following the discussion, so that they will be emailed any new posts to that discussion until such time as they come back here and click and tell it to mute the discussion. And as you found out, when you receive an email from a discussion thread, you can go ahead and simply respond to that by responding to the email, and it will add it to the discussion. So that's one aspect of it that's I'm finding extremely useful. And what you can also do, something that we're testing in a project called Systems Thinking World at the moment, is to be able to carry on a discussion and actually summarize that discussion. So this is sort of a bootstrap at the moment, whereby we're actually carrying on a discussion about how we structure this environment. So the discussion is Systems Thinking World Design. There have been, I don't know, 50 or 60 comments to this discussion. The first 44 of those comments have been summarized here, so that if someone comes to the next person I invite to this project, they can come here and they can read this summary, and then they can add comments to the project. And this was set up so that it opens the discussion thread right in the Kumu window as opposed to somewhere else. And that's actually amazingly easy in terms of what they recently developed, so that it's all of the text that you put in the profile is done in a language called Markdown, which is extremely trivial. It has a half a dozen formatting conventions that you can use, and one of them is to actually put the label in brackets and then put the URL in parens, and then add this thing called lightbox equals full, so that it opens the discussion, which is actually somewhere else, in a lightbox, so someone can respond to the discussion without losing the context. So they add to this discussion, and then they're still back in the model, as opposed to being in some other web page. I mean, we tried to do this in the LinkedIn discussions on numerous occasions, and what happened was the summary for the discussion is often a wiki or a Google Docs document or something someplace, and someone reads the summary and goes to make a comment. They've lost the context, so that when they finish making the comment or finish reading the discussion, they have to find their way back to wherever it was for them to add a comment. So here, we put it together in such a way that it's easy to summarize, and we put the summary right on here, so that in this particular instance, I could go ahead and add an item that says summary. I could create this summary and then go to this discussion and simply grab this URL. Where is it? I lost it. I have too many windows open. Oh, here it is. Put this in here. Tell it the discussion. So that now that discussion opens in this window right on top of the map itself, so that someone can read the summary of they can look at the model, read the summary, and then actually add a comment right here in the same context that they were viewing the model. So that's a dimension of Kumu that has really sort of got me fascinated at the moment, because of the ability to keep all of the stuff relatively closely connected, as opposed to having them often in lots of different places. And as people add additional comments, then I can review the comments and add to the summary, so that if a person shows up, I ask somebody to look at this model 2 months after it was built, and 20 people have commented on it, and there's a summary of the comments. They can look at the summary, because I mean they're not going to go read the 50 posts that were already done historically over the last 2 months to the model, but they might read the summary and then add a discussion, so that when I point them to what I want them to look at, I don't send them to just the model. I send them to the model and the discussion summary so that they can look at the summary and comment on it. And then based upon their comments, I can continue to evolve the model to add additional things to it as appropriate as the understanding develops. So I'm finding it real easy to craft an environment that promotes sharing, well, developing a collective understanding of a set of relationships, sharing it with other people, soliciting feedback to promote the evolution of that common understanding. And if there are actually a couple of people that are working on the project itself that are actually in a position to contribute to it, you can actually make other people contributors to the project, so that multiple people can actually modify the map and evolve the summary, so that it doesn't all have to be done by one person. So it provides a very nice collaborative environment, as long as the participants have some understanding of how they expect to work together. There's right now there are several of us working on, what is it? This, which is more a collection of content than it is actually a model, but we've been evolving a set of thoughts around the state of the economy, and there are 2 contributors and 2 managers to this particular project, and there's only a couple of discussions. The first one has 248 posts to it, and the second one has 15, and we are remiss in that we have actually not summarized this project at the moment, which is not a good thing. So we're actually not following our own guidelines, but we're working on it. It's an evolving perspective. The other thing about Kumu that is extremely not obvious, that I had difficulty with initially, is that notice up here it says switch maps. There's one map and one perspective here. A project can have multiple maps, but there's only one set of content. Imagine or think about a map of the United States. The United States is it's a contiguous, it's a land mass that could be represented in multiple ways. So that if you look at a travel map, it's got all of these rest areas and stops and site things that are on the map that are useful to you. Or you could look at a topographical map of the same space and it looks completely different. The idea is that in a project for Kumu, there is a set of data, and you display that data in different ways on different maps as appropriate. For this project that I was talking about a moment ago, this project, this particular map is for the design layout of the discussions, the models, and the projects. Though there's another map, this is the endeavors map, which talks about the projects and the discussions and the models, though there's another map which is entities and methods, which talks about different organizations associated with systems thinking, some companies, and some models and methods that claim to embrace the systems paradigm. Though on these two maps, notice that there's events which are future events that are going to happen, and this is updates about updates that have happened with regard to this project. Those two items also exist on this map. They're the same items. If I change the content on either map, it will be reflected on the other map because it's just a single item. So that developing a set of data, you may want to represent that data in different ways. And probably the best example of that on steroids is the set of content that Jeff McDonald is developing with regard to health and healthcare, a set of models that he has been developing. And this is a set of data, though if you go to switch maps, he has a whole set of maps that present different cross-sections of that data in different ways, depending upon what he's trying to accomplish and present. And you notice that they actually the maps look different. And the reason is that for a project, you can have a number of maps and you can have a number of perspectives. A perspective is a definition of the way that you style the presentation of the content of the map. You could have multiple maps that use the same perspective, or you could have one map and you could have different perspectives that style that data in different ways depending upon what it is that you want to depict. And in terms of doing that styling, you can come here and they've created sort of aids to decorate. You say, I want to decorate all elements and I want to change the size and I want the size of the elements to be 20 and I want the elements to be orange. So that now I've altered the styling of the elements and I can decorate the connections so that I want all of the connections to be 8 and I can style them. Well, we'll just leave that and change the color. No, I don't want to do the color now. Sorry. So I've made the connections larger. Now, because this is a causal loop diagram, what I really want to add plus and minus signs to the relationships so that it's evident what the relationship is. For every element, connection, and loop, there are additional things that you can define. Every entity has a type. You can add a set of tags for it. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the tags at the moment, though. They are tags that you can assign, that you can do searches on, or you can sort the data on, or you can change the way that it's presented or styled. And you can add new attributes to define different aspects, and I'll show you a piece of this in a minute. But for now, what I want to say is I want to add a new connection type, and I simply want to call it plus, which adds a plus sign, so that this one also is the same type. This one is the same type. And this one is really a minus. So now I have the relationship indicators. I forgot to add the arrow on this one. Now what I also want to do is now I want to go back and I want to style these. So I want to decorate the connections, and I want to decorate for the connection type is plus. I want to change the color so that it's blue. So now all the pluses are blue. And then I want to decorate the connections to change the colors so that not all, I want to do it for just the connection type is minus. Change the color to red. So I've now styled this, and what it ends up doing is the scripts that they've built to assist in doing this are actually writing a CSS file that you can actually edit directly. And after you spend time with Kumu and understand what the filters and the decorations are doing, you'll end up modifying or developing the CSS script directly. What you end up doing more than anything else is the same thing I found out with HTML. You find a set of HTML code that does something that you like, and you sort of recycle it to use it to do something that you want to do. So once you figure out what the forms look like, you can then go ahead and use them to do other things. So so what it does is puts that in, right now it's all part of the default perspective. But I could go ahead and create a new perspective and call it pers2. So notice that now when I look at this, I look at the map, this map is now on this perspective, which doesn't define anything. There's no definition at the moment for that perspective. There's nothing there. But I could go back and say, all right, I really want to see this with this perspective. So I've simply switched the perspective, which defines the styling for what's presented. And you can do that endlessly, so that you can create another map and use the same set of data, different data. And if you right, and there's also a set of other pieces in here so that you can edit the connection types and revise the types and the element types. There aren't any element types at the moment though, and the labels and the loops and the tags. So there's a set of management features to work with them. Though what I find most useful is simply the fluid nature of the environment. It makes Insight Maker feel stunted when I look at how fluid the environment feels. Which is why I said I'd much rather define or develop relationship diagrams. So just because, let's call this hindrance, and then add this. This is adds to. So what I'm doing is this is now a fixes that fail structure, simply because I've added what is actually if you follow it from the gap to here to here, it's actually a reinforcing loop, so that I can define this in a couple of ways. Probably the best way is to select these two and these two and call it R2 um, um, hindrance. So I now have another label, and if I select this and hold it, what it's showing me is just this particular loop. So I could read about this loop, and if I click in the background, it brings it all back, and if I click and hold this, it just shows me that loop. And I would prefer that it didn't show me this connection with the way that they have the program operating at the moment, because that's a connection between the two pieces that are in there. It shows me this connection also, even though it's not part of this loop. And I keep asking them to fix this, and as of yet, they don't see it as a problem. But I'll keep working on them. So even though there isn't a storytelling mode per se, there is a way to walk through this piece by piece and just look at the segments of the model and unfold it the way that it's defined or sequenced based upon the way that you label the loops. So you can have descriptions of the loop, and if someone wants additional detail, they can look at the descriptions that you've provided of the individual elements, and it may also be appropriate to describe the relationship between the elements, which you can also do. So that hopefully that gives you a sense of why it is that I really think that Kumu is a real nice environment for rapidly developing a relationship model and sharing it with other people, and enabling them to comment back to you and use those comments to continue to evolve the model, as opposed to developing the model in one place and going and looking for comments someplace else, or having them send you email, which then probably gets lost in the shuffle someplace. If they will go to the comments, actually submit the comments, then you actually have this historical trail of all of the comments that were provided with regard to the model, and the summary that you have developed that other people get to review before they do the comments. Because, as I said, if the comment thread has gone on for any period of time, it's highly unlikely that they're going to go back and review the whole set of comments that have also or already been provided. So you're likely to get a lot of the same comments over and over and over again. So when you ask them to come here, you point them to this location, so that they get to read the summary, can click right here and add a comment to it, or they can click through, look at different aspects of the map itself or the model itself, and then click on the summary, and then go ahead and add comments to it. So personally, I find the environment extremely fluid, more conducive to developing a model and sharing it with others and soliciting comments than the previous environments that we've been able to figure out. So that's sort of what I wanted to talk about with regard to developing relationship models in Kumu at the moment. Are there any questions? I'm underwhelmed by all the questions. Okay, well, then it looks like it's going to be another short session if there aren't any questions. Jim says he's dying to just go play with it. And that is probably my primary recommendation. Just go play with it. And if you run into things that don't make sense or you have questions, send me the questions or send them to Jeff. If in any discussion, if you reference a Kumu username, that person will get a copy of that email, even if they are not following the discussion thread. So that if I come here and look at this discussion and I type in @Jeff, what's the problem with whatever, and I send this, Jeff Moore will get a copy of this email because @Jeff is Jeff's Kumu username. And my Kumu username is not Gene. My Kumu username is STW. So if you're working on a model that you want me to look at, that you're having a question about, the quickest way for you to get to me is right in the discussion thread for the model. Is just type @STW and your question, and I'll get the email. Which there's a good and bad part about that, because which I've also asked them if they could figure out how to do something about, because if you look at this, if you look at this discussion with all these comments, I don't remember who some of these people are. All right, some, but some I don't know. I don't remember who Antler Boy is and who. Oh yeah, there's Mike. I remember Mike, but I mean JLM Japan. I mean some people have relatively cryptic Kumu usernames, so it's difficult to remember who they are, and it doesn't help the fact that this provides their Kumu username. So what I end up having to do is select it and going to their profile and hope that they actually put their name in to go with their Kumu username, so that I then have it. But yeah, it's they're writing code as fast as they can, and it's progressing well. I'm pleased with the things that they continue to do. Yeah, Robert commented that he's a bit behind and he just needs to get into it, and it's a lot like riding a bicycle. I mean, I can sit here and I can show you things endlessly, but they don't stick until you actually go and spend time with it and interact with it and play with it and make it do things. Carl asks a question about the integration of course lecture and instantaneous discussion is excellent and seems to resolve a number of problems of how discussions work in your course. How are you going to utilize it to revise the course? I'm not sure I have a real good answer for that yet, Carl. I know that I'm debating whether or not to actually put out the revision as another certification course, or to put it out more like a web-based ebook that people interact with, that has sort of the same kind of, in other words, it has all of the discussions, it has periodic webcasts that talk about various aspects of the content, though it's not put together as a program sequence with a certification at the end. It's more a book that people can read here and there, the aspects of it that are of interest to them. And I have to talk to a number of people about which approach might make more sense. And if you have some thoughts about that, I'd appreciate it if you send me an email. And it's in flux at the moment. I've committed to have it done by September 1st. So the days are marching on, and my headaches get worse. Why not both? Oh, Carl. Carl commented about why not both. Maybe has a lot to do with the extent of Gene's availability to cope with many things at the same time. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Go spend some time with it, and let me know. All right. Take care. Be online in half hour or so. Bye.